Hello, hello, and welcome once again to the David Messiah YouTube channel, where our watchwords are to teach and to build back up the kingdom of Zion. The title of this talk is The Niger Coup is the beginning of the prophetic fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7, verse 18. The Niger Coup is the beginning of the prophetic fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7, verse 18. And I am to bring you this message at this time because it is obviously of great, great significance. And let me read Daniel chapter 7 verse 18 to you. And I'll start at verse 17. These great beasts which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. And that is a reference to the four kingdoms of the Gentiles that arose at some point, starting with Babylon, moving on to Medo-Persia, to Greece, and then a fourth kingdom which is otherwise not named. And here's verse 18. But the saints of the Most High, which is the chosen people, the Israelites, which is the Negro, shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. So there's a powerful word there, take the kingdom. And so I'm to let you know that with that coup in Niger is where this verb to take is where this verb now that clearly applies. Now, Niger is only one of 14 Francophone African states which have been subject to neo-colonial pillage and plunder by the erstwhile colonial power France, which really is now the neo-colonial power France, because they agreed certain what were called I think they were called pacts. Forgive me, there's a nice talk on that by Dr. Arikana. I'm not familiar with all of the details, but essentially provided that France would continue to, for example, issue the currency, the CFA franc. France would continue to pillage and plunder by way of keeping, 50% of all reserves held by those Francophone African countries, would continue to pillage and plunder by having a kind of a monopoly over the resources of those countries for France and for French companies, having to do with now extracting the mineral wealth of those lands. For example, in the case of Niger, uranium ore, which is what is used by France to some large degree to power its own nuclear power plants, along with gold. So France has been taking uranium ore from Niger, I think at something like $11 a ton, or whatever the figure is, whereas on the market price is $218. Whatever that unit was, whether it was tons or kg, I forget now. So in other words, France was paying 5%. 5 cents on the dollar for the value of what they were taking out of Niger. Okay, so that Niger, rich in terms of its mineral endowment, um, was rendered poor by the kind of neo-colonial pillage and plunder that France has been carrying out in that land, and indeed all the other 14 Francophone African countries. And France is just one of the other many neo-colonial powers, and the United States is amongst them. And they have been pursuing a neo-colonial policy of continued rapine, pillage, and plunder, as we read and as is admitted by Perkins in his book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And it is a simple enough kind of a program. It's a mafioso kind of a program. Okay, the idea is they say to the African presidents or prime ministers, as the case might be, take the silver, which is the bribe, or in the alternative, take the lead, which is the bullet. And we will put somebody else that is willing to take the silver. That is the essential program. And the point of the bribe is that president then agrees to make his country wide open to this pillage and plunder, and he becomes now part of that pillage and plunder himself by in the way of Mobutu, for example. So where his predecessor Patrice Lumumba would not take the silver, and so he was killed. He was taken out by the lead, so to say. Okay, and then Mobutu was put into that position where now Mobutu was taking the silver. So Mobutu got billions. Well, if Mobutu got billions, you could be sure that the neo-colonial plunderers came out with trillions. That's how it is, orders of magnitude. And Congo, Kinshasa there, that Mobutu was ahead of, another state that is rich, immensely rich in minerals. Nowadays one of the most important minerals coming out of Congo is coltan. And there's been scramble for that coltan. Coltan is used in the making of electronic microcircuitry and cell phones and so forth. And that's why there's been continuing war in the eastern part of Congo, because when there is that kind of chaos going on, that's when the pillage and the plunder can be greatest. Okay, so that was what is admitted by Perkins in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and he said, well, all right, where the president refuses the silver, and to use his terms, then they would send out their jackals, who are the assassins, and they would take him out. Raoul Peck, that Haitian filmmaker, made a very excellent movie about Lumumba, and how they took him out. I mean, gruesome in some of the details, but a very excellent movie. And the United States was part of that. And the United States built up Mobutu, even though Belgium, as the former colonial power, was also very much involved. Okay, so that the neo-colonial powers, it's not a singular entity, it is all those that were involved. And they were there at the Berlin Conference in the late 1800s, when they agreed how they would carve up Africa. Okay, so Niger now, here we are, year 2023, has finally said enough is enough, and by coup, not by any sort of democratic process which has been controlled by the neo-colonial powers, okay, not by any sort of so-called democratic process, but by a swelling up, of the people whose voice now has said, okay, no, enough is enough. And Mosiah has raised up a generation that was strong enough mentally, strong enough physically, strong enough in the power that they now wield the military, that indeed they could carry out this coup. And now to stare down the West. And it is happening, why? Because now it is clear that the West is over. We see that in 2nd Ezra chapter 9, which I have quoted before, verse 5, for like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest, even so the times also of the highest, the Most High, have plain beginnings in wonders and powerful works, and endings in effects and signs. And we know what we are asserting is that the time of the Gentiles is now over, as was prophesied. It said, 2nd Ezra chapter 6, verse 9, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is it that immediately followeth. So Esau has had the dominion in the form of those 4 kings of the Gentiles, and now that time is up. And if Esau's time is up, that is an end in terms of the times of the Most High. Esau's time is up. And we now see that with what? Effects and signs. What are the effects? I've addressed that in a recent upload. NATO's nakedness is exposed. One effect of that is that NATO's power has been shown up by Russia as to no avail. Russia was able to use a hypersonic missile, the Kinjal, to take out an American Patriot defense battery, and they have no answer to that. They sent HIMARS. Russia found a way to overcome. They sent the howitzer, the M777 howitzers. Russia found a way to take those out. So whatever the Americans, NATO, has now sent against Russia, Russia has shown them up to be, in effect, a paper tiger. With all the billions America has spent paying Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and General Dynamics and all of these military industrial complex capitalist formations. They have been taking and taking and taking billions and trillions out of the United States Treasury, out of its budget, to produce weapons that do not work. Certainly do not work as claimed, because the Russians are spending orders of magnitude less, have developed weapons that can counter and indeed overcome all of these vaunted weapons produced by the United States. So their military dominance has been shown up to be, in effect, a lie. It's a paper tiger. So that is one effect that we see physically on the ground. And there's signs, and the signs that would, the signs that we would see is there as being, it was prophesied in Revelation chapter 18, where it says, verse 2, as he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils. That's a sign. When Babylon falls, it will become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. And who are these devils? That's LGB, etc., where we find even those in the so-called church advocating for LGB, advocating for same-sex marriage, quite contrary to the clear word of God, advocating for the idea that marriage can be between other than man and woman. Marriage can be between same-sex. And they are advocating powerfully, trying to get laws changed. They got the Anglican Church, Marcus Welby, Justin Welby, the primate of the Anglican Church, essentially to rubber stamp that idea that marriage can be between same sex. I think the Catholic Church also has leaned in that direction. So that is one of the signs, along with the effects that we now see, that the physical power projection that they enjoyed before, while Esau wielded the dominion, that physical power projection has been reduced to not quite naught, but it certainly has now been eclipsed by Russia and indeed by China. So that we have, for example, the very latest and greatest aircraft carrier that the United States has produced, costing I don't know how many billions of dollars, requiring however many thousands of sailors to run it, is now simply a target wherever it goes on the ocean, because essentially it now has no defense against the kind of hypersonic missile that the Russians certainly, and I think also the Chinese, can launch against those kinds of floating targets. They have no defense against it. So it is. So this is an effect of a change in the order. So where before an aircraft carrier could be a power projection device, because it comes with squadrons of fighter jets and so forth, it would be a way to project power. Now it cannot project power in the same way as before. Now it is just a target. You understand? So that's an effect that Esau's time is up. Okay, so what is this thing, in terms of Esau and Jacob? Let us go back to the beginning. because there were two twins warring from the womb. And we saw here in Genesis chapter 27. So you will have to read this in its entirety to get the full context. But let me go here to Genesis 27, verse 28, where Jacob, the younger twin, was given the blessing of the dominion. And Jacob and Esau's mother, Rebekah, was given to know by the Most High that blessing would indeed go to the younger twin. Anyway, but here it is, verse 20, therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. So this was the dominion. First he will be given the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Jacob is the Negro. Negro is just a word whose meaning has been hidden deliberately from us. That means those people who are of the same tribal root and origin as the Neger, which was a praise title applied to King David. A praise title that means simply he that is watched over, implicitly or impliedly by the Most High, the apple of God's eye. That's what Neger means. And since it was a praise title applied to the king, King David, it itself came to mean king. A Negro, or Negara, or Nigar, and their variations in terms of how that word can be vocalized. When you go back to the original Paleo-Hebrew, is simply adverting to those people tribally of the same root as the Neger. That's what Negro means. Those people of the same tribal origin root as the Neger. So by definition, the Negro is Israel, Jacob. I do not make any assertions here as to the skin color, because we know through a couple of mechanisms, albinism for one, and what the Bible calls leprosy for a second, nowadays called vitiligo, a Negro who starts out with a dark skin color, highly pigmented skin color, can end up depigmented and therefore pale of skin. So I'm not adverting to any kind of skin color definition of the word Negro. If a Negro has become depigmented, that doesn't change the fact that he's a Negro. And you can prove that also scripturally. Go to 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 27. And there's an example of that. I won't go there now. I'm just making the point that another word for Jacob or Israel, to whom this blessing of the dominion was given, is Negro. And who is it here now that has performed or made this coup? It is Niger. Not just a fancy French pronunciation of the same word, Negro. The Niger coup is a Negro coup. That's what that is. So in the word itself, you are saying this is Jacob has taken the kingdom. He's brought to an end the neo-colonial rape, pillage, and plunder that has been carried out by France, which is one of those entities that constitutes the Esau, Edomite formation. So let us go now to this Edomite formation. In the same chapter, verse 40, we see how Esau also was given the dominion. And I start at verse 38, and Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Verse 39. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth. That was given to Jacob, wasn't it? And of the dew of heaven from above. That was given to Jacob, wasn't it? That's part of the dominion. That's how come you could have this idea of colonial pillage and plunder. If the fatness of the earth is Africa, for example, given to Jacob, but it is given also here to Esau. The only way that can happen is if there's a colonial sort of manifestation where Jacob is on that land, that is the fatness of the earth, but Esau can now come, reduce Jacob to slavery in effect, and take that land from him and enjoy the benefits of it. So that's how come they can both be enjoying the same thing, isn't it? But here's verse 40. And by thy sword shalt thou live. By thy sword shalt thou live. That was not there for Jacob. And shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou, Esau, shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. And I'll read verse 41, because that's part of what has gone on. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing, wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. So Esau hated Jacob. He didn't just exercise the dominion. He brought with that exercise a hatred. He brought with that exercise an active kind of program of oppression. He made Jacob to kind of wallow in poverty on his own land. And that is what this first colonial rapine, pillage and plunder was about. And then now neo-colonial pillage and plunder. And in accordance with what has been admitted in the Perkins book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And that's what France has been doing in Francophone Africa. But it wasn't only France. Britain did the same thing in its colonies. Britain has done the same in its neo-colonial phase as well. So, for example, Britain established, control and pillage over the oil produced there in Nigeria. And by the way, they're also flying out gold from Nigeria. People don't even know about that. Flights taking off from the jungles, they've cleared, landing strips for planes, and their planes going on daily, carrying out gold mined from Nigeria. People don't know that. But anyway, they have had control over the oil produced by Nigeria from colonial days and continuing now into a neo-colonial phase. Okay? And the same program has been at work. So you've had these dictators, you've had these presidents, whether democratically elected or otherwise, who have been playing ball with Britain and raking off their billions, even as they allowed Britain through the various oil companies, including American ones, Shell and BP and etc. They've been, ripping off that country of its at least oil wealth. So that program has been going on. But I want now to make the point about in verse 40, and by thy sword shalt thou live. Because when you read the sealed book of Moses, one has to go to that to fully understand what that really means. This is harking back to what went on between the two, well, I don't know if they were twins, they're sometimes called twins, Cain and Abel. And Cain hated Abel also, because Abel's offerings were accepted and Cain's were not. And when you read the sealed book of Moses, you understand that Satan worked with Cain's feelings of envy and of hatred and of jealousy. And Cain actually made a pact with Satan. But to seal that pact, Cain had to slay Abel, his brother. So that is where now the blood comes in. So where here it says, and by thy sword shalt thou live, this is referring to, implying and including the idea that in the exercise of the dominion, Esau shall have had to make a pact with Satan, with the devil. Okay, and part of that pact required him to slay by the sword on a continuing and ending up in an industrial scale kind of a basis. So every so often there has to be a war in which young men are slain by the hundreds of thousands to satisfy that pact that would have been made with Satan. And as compared to that, and in contrast with that, the dominion that was given to Jacob said nothing about by the sword. It says what? Cursed be everyone, this is verse 29, that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. So that is the only element of compulsion, of coercion, in the way that Jacob shall exercise the dominion. And that was covenanted first with the father Abraham. Blessed be he that blesseth thee, and cursed be he that curseth thee. So that when it is that that Jacob exercises the dominion, all those who are subject to his dominion, knowing this fact, will in effect submit to Jacob's dominion, because it is a terrible thing, for the Most High to come after you because you have now cursed his people in the exercise of that which was given to him by the Most High, which is the dominion. And there's all these stories there in the Old Testament that let you to know But when God is with Jacob, no man, no power on earth can overcome Jacob. That's the end of the story of Gideon, where you had, what was it? A small army, I forget the number, whether it was just 300 or even less than 300. Basically put an army of over 100,000 to flight. That was at the hand of God. There's a story of just two brothers, Simeon and Levi, essentially slaughtering an entire town. And there are other numerous examples like that. So they know, and all were made to know back in the day, that you don't mess with Jacob. And Jacob upholds his chosen, the Most High upholds Jacob, his chosen, when Jacob himself is obedient to the law of the covenant. But contrariwise, when Jacob disobeys the law of the covenant, man, anybody can overcome Jacob in that case. You understand? So that's how that worked. That's spoken of at some length in the book of Judith. So all the nations round about knew that in order to overcome Jacob, the strategy that they had to pursue was to get Jacob to disobey the law of God, to get Jacob to be like the Gentiles, to get Jacob to no longer circumcise as required, to get Jacob to not observe the set-apart feasts. As long as we're in a state of disobedience, then all power is taken away from Jacob, and the Most High does not uphold them. But when Jacob is in obedience to that law of the Holy Covenant, there's not a power on earth that can overcome Jacob. And that is why Jacob went into, in effect, slavery. That is there. In the book of Hosea, at least implicitly. I'll start at verse 1. Come and let us return unto Yahweh, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He hath smitten and he will bind us up. And this is where we're getting to now. Verse 2. After 2 days, a day here being 1,000 years, will he revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Well, I've spoken about that in my last upload, I think, but here's a little point here to make. After 2,000 years will he revive us. Well, if he's going to revive us, the word revive means to bring back from out of a state of unconsciousness, a state of slumber, a state of sleep. So in effect, the Most High put us to sleep, put us into a state of slumber, to where we had no might in our hands to resist the colonial and neo-colonial pillage to which we have been subjected. You understand? Okay. This is a case of, like, to use another analogy, like a boxer going into the ring. And let's use Jack Johnson. They sent a lot of great white hopes to defeat Jack Johnson. Well, the only way they could have defeated Jack Johnson, which, by the way, Jack is another word for Jacob, isn't it? And John is referring to that prophet or apostle or whatever you want to call him. John the Baptist, who was sent with a little light to wake us up. But anyway, they kept sending these great white hopes to defeat Jack Johnson. And the only way for them to defeat Jack Johnson was basically to have both hands tied behind his back, you understand? So when the Most High put us into a state of slumber, that was the precondition to them being able to exercise the dominion and to exercise neo-colonial and prior to that colonial rape, pillage and plunder. But what is happening? In the third day, he's going to raise us up. Well, that's where we are now, and we shall live in his sight. So this Negro coup is that wonder and powerful work that heralds, that lets us to know that this is now at the hand of the Most High, that this coup has taken place, which is letting us to know that it is more than a coup. That powerful work was that the whole of that football stadium in Niamey was filled with the people in support of that coup. So it wasn't an undemocratic seizure by some general that made a deal with the plunderer. That's what a lot of those coups have been. So that now that general can be the one to receive his rake off of the pillage and plunder. No, this is now a swelling up of the people who have had enough. And what is the difference there between a coup and a revolution? The revolution is when the tables now have been turned. The revolution is when the coup indeed is supported by the people. And this is what now is going on. And as it is for Niger, the same is what it will be. And this is the message I am to bring. This is the beginning of the prophetic fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7, verse 18, because it's not going to end with Niger. It will continue to include all of those 14 Francophone states of Africa and beyond. Nigeria is going to be swallowed up in it, and the Congo, including the Congo Brazza, which is Francophone, and the Congo Kinshasa, which is the DRC. The whole of Negro Africa will now be included in this change. And this is what is here also prophesied at Isaiah chapter 14. I started verse 1. For Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob. Because yes, we have violated his law, and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob, and the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of Yahweh for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. So this is not just a coup. This is a revolution. This is a turning of the tables. This is the dominion now going from Esau, who has had it for a time and times and a half of time, and that time is now up, and we are now at that stage where the dominion is being handed back to Jacob. As we just read, 2 Ezra chapter 6 verse 9, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So this is what is happening. This is what is happening. So we have seen the effects of the dominion having slipped away from Esau. It's there, it's certainly exposed by Russia in the context of that Ukraine war with NATO. But it was NATO is 30-something countries, including France, who have gone against Russia, trying to defeat Russia, and have certainly been at war in some sense with Africa, with the Negro in Africa for however many years. And the program is the same in either case. They have warred against Russia in order to rape, to pillage, to plunder its bountiful natural resources, the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth, with which the Russian people have been endowed by their Creator. And in Africa it was the same, the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth. They have been raping, pillaging, and plundering to their benefit. And now, and the Most High let them do it. Because that's what dominion means. If you're exercising the dominion, whether you are doing so in a righteous way or doing it in an unrighteous way, whether you're doing it with hatred in your heart or otherwise, the Most High will put a stamp to your exercise of that dominion. Because when the Most High makes a covenant, He keeps it. And He covenanted through Isaac with Esau that Esau would have that dominion. There was a rider to it, by thy sword shalt thou live. And that's what has been happening. And the Most High let it to happen. But then, having now come to this point, to where His time is up, Most High is consistent. He also made that pact with Jacob, isn't it? To where Jacob now will revert, the dominion will now revert to Jacob. So where he was co-signing or undersigning or simply approving, putting the stamp to whatever decisions that Esau made, wicked though most of them were, he will now put that same stamp of approval to the exercise by Jacob of that dominion. And I'm to let you know that the Niger Coup, the Negro Coup, is the beginning of the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7 verse 18, where it says, the Negro, Jacob, shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom even forever and ever. And the Most High will make, he says elsewhere, that He will write His very law in our inward parts, so that when we now come back into the dominion, it will essentially be impossible for us not to keep His law. And even those who who cannot be part of that program. 2/3 will be cut off and die. But the remnant, with whom the Most High can have this arrangement whereby that remnant will keep his law. It is that remnant that will now possess the kingdom, exercise dominion forever and ever afterwards. And that is the whole idea of the kingdom of Zion. That is the whole idea of this millennium of peace into which we're entering. And it will be a millennium of peace. Why? Because there's no rider in the dominion given to Jacob that he must live by the sword. Quite the opposite. He will not make any pact with Satan. Therefore, there will be no need for frequent sacrificial offerings, huge offerings of blood unto Satan through war and more war. So in the seventh millennium of peace into which we are now entering, it shall be a millennium where swords will be beaten down into plowshares, spears will be turned into pruning hooks, the lion will live peacefully with the lamb. Even the animals will behave differently from from how we've known them to behave. That is what is now going on. Okay, so that is the message that I have been tasked to bring you this morning. There was a point I wanted to bring as well with it, but I seem to have forgotten exactly what that was. So I will stop here and